Hello, everyone. Welcome to WunderWisdom. This is Wednesday, June 8th, 2022. And I think this is podcast number 10. Woo! Hey, Scott, we're getting up there in the world.
We made it.
A lot of wisdom being shared. And I said something else about something else being shared. But either way we look at it, today we're going to talk about the issue of governance, and I put that in quotations. So here's how I thought I would encapsulate our discussion today. The issue of government is prevalent these days, particularly in the context of mandates and other ways our behavior is being controlled. And I'm sure we could all agree that the government is the embodiment of our collective ideals of governance, or how the place gets run, if you will. And as we continue to watch what is happening in the world, we see that most nations' governments and their agencies have been instrumental in how the world has progressed, or not, as the case may be. So the podcast today, which I'm largely going to stay out of and let Scott's brilliance shine through, is about governance. Now, we, meaning Scott and I, have discovered that when we back out of concepts that seem fixed and concrete to us, we can better unravel what is being done, rightly or wrongly. And when we can see clearly that our fixed institutions were born from ideas, thoughts, desires, and needs of the collective, we can then begin to see our part and then maybe try to fix things. So Scott Patton, welcome to today. Without further comment, I'd like to welcome you. Thank you for always showing up with your profound thinking. And this is a great outlet for the kind of work that you do. I love it. And so I'm going to let you lay the framework for what you have to say, which in my view is pretty profound, always. And always, 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 this podcast is about how we, each one of us, can make a difference in the world and create great change by beginning right here.
That was an absolutely incredible introduction. I feel like you did a fantastic job of basically summarizing everything I've been thinking about for the past little while. So basically what you're going to hear from me for the next little while is just another way to say exactly what you did. So
yeah, well, we share a brain, Pinky, so
yeah, no kidding.
We're on the way to world domination.
Apple doesn't fall far from the tree, no doubt. Yeah, so when we started talking about this idea, it was funny how it worked, because it starts off as, a simple question of what is the government? And looking at our world as something like cause and effect, it was constantly taking a step back, like you were saying, and it was trying to get things to first principles, like setting a foundation for something. And it came to some, like you said, pretty simple realizations, but I think they're pretty profound in how they play out in our everyday lives and kind of what it means to be a human being. And that is essentially our societal institutions are external manifestations of our internal desires. Mm-hmm. What's a very clear way of saying that? If someone is going to fill a role in society, there has to be something that they're serving on behalf of the people that they're serving. For example, we have plumbers in society. Why? Because the human beings that make up the society want water, right? We have electricians in society. Why? Because the human beings that make up the society want and need electricity. And you can basically go down and do this for all of our institutions that we have, set up right now, all the industries, institutions, different jobs and whatnot. It is very obvious, but it is very important to realize that there is first a desire on behalf of the human being. And if enough people have that desire, it turns into a collective desire. And then it turns into someone then looks to fill that desire and fill that role. If there wasn't the desire, there would be no reason for an institution to fill it. And it's kind of like the idea of, you can't sell ice to an Eskimo, right? Because people who are way up north in the freezing cold, they have ice abounds, they have no real desire for it. So there would be no institution to sell it to people, kind of thing.
So in other words, it's the marketing principle of supply and demand.
It's very simple. Exactly. You got it. Now, although, again, that is very simple, the reason I thought it was so profound was because realizing that everything that we have in our external society or external world that we have created as human beings, once again, is a reflection of something that we want or need. And I will combine want and need into like a desire. And so basically, you can't have a conversation about anything, any external manifestation in society, without having the first principle conversation about where does it arise from?
Why is it there?
Why is it there? Exactly. And it's specifically relevant to, to a conversation about a government or governance, because in a very simple way of thinking about it, you can look at our government right now. It's a small group of people that represent the wants and needs of a large group of people. Fundamentally, that's what it's supposed to be.
Mhm.
So you can't really have a conversation about the activity of a small group of people before understanding that they represent a large group of people and the wants and needs. So then you have to go to, well, what are the wants and needs on behalf of the large group of people, which is essentially individuals. And this really brought me back to, again, a first principles way of thinking of what does it mean to be a human being? Because nothing in our external world that we set up as a society will make sense until we understand ourselves. And there's probably, it's come to be my favorite quote of all time, which you recognize: as within, so without.
Yes.
And it's funny that it's such a simple saying, but it encapsulates truly what it means to be a human being. And that is probably the best way in word economy. It's 4 words, but it represents this entire concept. There is an internal desire on behalf of an individual that down the line gets materialized in the world as an institution, as a company, as, whatever it is.
An industry. Yep.
Industry. So this led me down to thinking, well, what does it mean to be a human being? And I really want to kind of posit 2 ideas that I think are extremely profound. The first one is looking at how a human being exists in time. That is, we have a past, we have the present, and we have the future. And that's basically all we can ever possibly live in as human beings. There's a past, there's a present, and there's a future. And I want to start with the past, if that's okay with you.
No.
I assume so. Okay. So
Just messing with you, buddy. Yeah.
I know. So this gets into some really interesting wordplay, but we know that we have genes in our body, and the word gene is very much related to the word genesis. And that idea is that which has been around since the beginning.
So something that is born, is that the idea of Genesis?
It's something that is born, and essentially something that has, been around since the beginning. Like it's like the very beginning in some sense.
Okay.
And when we're talking, and the reason that we call our DNA genes is because they've existed for a long time. They've been passed down from lineage to lineage to lineage. And to take a very kind of almost, I guess you could say, a biological standpoint, our genetics, our DNA, they're physical libraries that have stored human experience over an incredibly vast amount of time.
Correct.
Right? There's so much that has gone into building our genes. And the idea of like the survival of the fittest, it's, that's really not too much of a daunting idea from Charles Darwin, but it's the idea that the things that exist can adapt to their environment. So
Right.
essentially, if we exist today, that means the lineage of our genetics has been all the accrued experience of human beings over time, all the folks that have been able to survive over time.
Right.
It's essentially like a physical storage house of accrued wisdom over time.
And say that again. Say that again.
It's a physical, storage or storehouse.
Storehouse.
Wisdom over time.
Accrued wisdom over time.
It's
Write that one down, everybody. I'm going to. Wow.
Well, and so I think the reason that it's so wonderfully important as a human being is to recognize that we do have a past. And I like to think of it that we are built of the past, right? All of the genetics and all of the DNA, the lineage, that has been accruing over time. And that's what we're built of. We're built of the meals that we've eaten in the past. We're built of the exercise that we've done. We're built of the ideas that we've been given in the past.
Yeah.
And to understand that we are psychologically, biologically, emotionally, spiritually, all that, we are built of the past.
So I just saw a post recently and it was beautiful. It said, we are the hope that our ancestors had. Isn't that
It's,
beautiful?
I'm going to come back to that quote because I think that that's a beautiful way of encapsulating where we're going to get to. So
Okay, cool.
Yeah, you'll see
Love
where
it.
that comes into play.
Okay.
And so to understand that we have a past, but we also have a present and we also have a future. So to look at it as, if we get caught in the past, if we get stuck in the past, then we never really make it to the present or the future. And this idea of Genesis in genes, that is everything that has been around since the beginning, that has been accruing all that wisdom. Genesis in genes is related to the word genius. And I think that is so important because I would say that a true genius is someone who can learn and can pay attention in the present moment. However, I don't believe that you can get to the present moment unless you have forgiven, understood, learned from, reconciled, and integrated your past.
Right.
You have like we might as well call it an infinite amount of wisdom that you were built out of, that has been accruing over time through human beings and through your own life experience.
Right.
There is so much wisdom stored within you.
Yeah.
However, if you get lost in the past, if you haven't reconciled it, if you haven't forgiven it, healed from it, if you haven't really brought it into the present moment, it is of no value.
Learn something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It is.
That's simple.
I think it really is. And it's kind of looking at, we can be a master or a slave in each one of these time dimensions. So in our past, we can be the master. We can truly learn from, heal, forgive, and integrate all that we've ever been, not just us, but all of the wisdom of our ancestors. If we can do that, then we can actually pay attention to the present moment. And that's called learning. I would say we are built of the past, but we are updated by the present. Everything we've gone through, but we're supposed to be updated by all of the current information. That is the present moment. Now, if we're stuck in the past, if we haven't,
and how to apply it, right?
And
we're shown, it's brought to us how to apply it.
Exactly.
Hey, Dumbo, how are you going to act in this situation? You know?
And if we haven't healed from the past and integrated it, then we're going to be playing out the same drama that we've been playing out over and over and over. This is the idea of karma. The word karma is very much related to action, and it's something that hasn't been forgiven and healed, so it keeps playing out. There's a quote saying, in forgiveness lies the stoppage of the wheel of karma. So if you think of that idea,
freedom.
If you haven't forgiven your past, it's going to keep playing out, and then you don't really see the present moment for what it is. It's the same old drama that's been going on.
Yeah. So you think about it, when you don't forgive, you continue to carry something, right?
Exactly.
We carry things. So when we forgive, we free ourselves. It is freedom. It has nothing to do with anybody else, everything to do with us. Yeah. Great way to bring that in, Scott.
Really. Yeah. And I love that you use the word, carry, because that is the reason that we use the word carry and baggage, is because if you haven't dealt with something from the past, you can feel it. It's not some airy-fairy idea. It's physical. How do you know when you've truly forgiven someone? You release something. You feel lighter. Yes. Exactly. You're not being weighed down by the past. Right. And this is where, the idea of Genesis and genes, if you can reclaim your entire past, your Genesis, your genes, all that you've been made of, then you can claim the present moment as a genius. And a genius is someone who can truly learn in the present moment.
Okay. Never thought of it that way. Beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. And the reason that I think it's so cool is if we take it that if we reconcile, we'll learn from, and we heal our past, and we integrate it into the now, then we can be a genius in the present moment. The word genius is related to the word genie. Right. What is a genie in a sense? Someone or it's something that you ask and it grants your wishes. Right. Here's the cool thing about being a human being. We can imagine a future. Now, this is not an ability which seemingly a lot of animals have. Essentially, as we developed more complex frontal lobes, it allowed us to step out of the present moment into abstract time, meaning we have a past, but we also have a future. Now, the future, you could say in some sense, isn't physically, materially real, but it is very real in that if you ask anybody, we'll all say that there is something as a future. We know that we are moving into it, right? Now, a genie is someone or something that we ask for something and it grants our wishes.
Right.
Well, I would posit that the only person who can truly interact with a genie is a genius. In a very simple way, you have to know who you are to know what you want. You have to know what you want for, you know what to ask for. Like, what is your true desire? What do you truly want and need? You're going to have to do some kind of real searching of all that you've ever been and all that you are in order for you to know what to ask for. The idea of the future is that, in some sense, it's not random. It is envisioned and created. That is, we kind of have this relationship with the future. That is, when we know all that we've been and who we are in this present moment as a genius, then we know what our true desires are, our wants and our needs. And then we can begin to negotiate or ask for the future. And perhaps that was a very long and convoluted way to get there, but the very simple way of saying that is, in order for us to get what we truly desire, we have to know what we truly desire in the first place. That is, what is our deepest wants and needs? And in order for us to access what our deepest wants and needs are, there's a lot of self-exploration, all that we've been in the past and all that's going on in the present moment.
So are you saying that until we have reconciled our past, learned something about ourselves, and seen a better vision for our future, we got no business asking?
Exactly, exactly. In fact, you won't even know what to ask for. Imagine you could have anything that you wanted. That's the idea of the genie. Well, the question obviously becomes, what do you want? What do you truly want or need? And you're either going to be asking the same old thing. It's kind of that karmic past, that same drama playing out over and over, or you'll be able to reconcile everything that you've been, integrate it, learn from exactly what's going on. And that gives you all of the most recent updated information, so you actually know what to ask for in the future.
You know, and totally added to that, or as an aside, is ask people what they want. People don't even know.
Yeah.
And I'm asking you, the listener, do you know what you want in life? What do you want? And could you ask for it? Yeah, and that's the start of everything, right? That's the beginning of everything. Everything we see, everything we have started with an idea. I want this. Wouldn't it? And here's the question. Wouldn't it be great if?
Mm-hmm.
It'd be great if I could, or have, or whatever, you know? So, okay, I'm with you.
And so let's just tie this right back to the idea of any external institution, in society or industry. That is, they are a reflection of the people's wants and needs, right? Desires. That's where we started.
Right.
So we had to go back to, well, what does it mean to actually want and need something as a human being? What do we want and need? And it's funny because it is the only question that essentially you could ever ask of yourself. And here's a kind of maybe an interesting way to look at it. And that is, there is a future, and let's say we move towards things in life, right? Well, we expend energy moving towards things in life. The question is, why would we use that energy? Because the assumption is that we'll get more of it moving towards it, or else why move towards it at all?
Why ask? Yeah.
Why ask? Like,
Right.
why go there in some sense, right? And so if we're going to move to a place where it's going to fulfill some fundamental want or need, which is going to make us feel better than we already were, then again, we can't get away from that question of who are we and what do we truly want and what do we truly need?
Right.
And so that's where I think it's really interesting to realize Genesis and genes, that is the accrued wisdom of all the people that have ever added to that experience in your experience.
Right.
You claim that. And that's not something that you go searching for in the external world. It's really something that is found within. And as we kind of talked about before we got on this podcast here, That was an inscription written on a temple in, I believe it's Delphi, way long ago. And the quote in the first of 3 instructions was, know thyself.
And another way of saying it was know thy measure. That adds a little bit of a flavor to that, know thy measure.
I'm gonna have to do a lot of thinking on that before I say something live on air here.
No, it's totally in line with what you're going to talk about. But yeah, and it's the first of 3. And the second maxim is nothing to excess.
Right.
Which we as a collective, a world collective, need to learn something from, I think. Right. And now
let's save the last one, because I think it's going to come in really nicely with the next part, if you don't mind.
Okay, yeah, no, of course not. And just a little background on these maxims. They've been attributed to at least 11 Greek sages, and including Pythagoras and Plato, which most people have thought of or are aware of. And I just want to say this, for those who think that ancient wisdom has no place in our life today, I would respond that it is indeed because we don't know or honor ancient wisdom that our world is in so much trouble.
It wouldn't be ancient wisdom if it wasn't incredibly useful in many ways, or else it wouldn't have survived.
Yeah,
right.
I guess so, for sure.
If it's still around and people are still talking about it,
it means something to somebody. Yeah.
The pejorative of the simple-minded to say that ancient wisdom is something you can throw away, because unless something stands the test of time in some sense, then it's not really that valuable. When most people know the idea that truth is timeless, if something is just kind of true for a week and then it's not, well, then it wasn't very true, right? Whatever is true will kind of be foundational, is true all the time, everywhere, kind of through time.
Or just to soften that a bit, it served its purpose in whatever period of time it showed up. I'm a firm believer that what shows up is necessary. It's just we have to put on our sorting hat and decide what's important to us, what has meaning for us. And we're all entitled to make that decision, right? Which is partly where we're going here. We're all entitled to make that decision according to our own body's wisdom, our own genes' wisdom, right? What fits in our life.
Yeah, absolutely. And just for the kind of last comment on that, oftentimes the ancient wisdom, they're very simple. They're not a lot of words. When you study great comedians, there's a concept with great comedians called word economy. That is, it's the efficiency of a joke. They can collapse an entire meaning into a very short amount of words, right? It's like when someone tells you a joke and they take an hour to explain it, and you're like, dude, you've done that in like, 10 words. Right? They're not a very good comedian. So that idea of being able to shrink an entire concept into something small, kind of like a symbol, right? Like a symbol can represent a massive concept in some sense. And so just because things are seemingly simple, simple is the ultimate form of sophistication, right? Like simple is genius in some sense. And so just the fact that something is simple, if it's simple and it stood the test of time and it's still relative today, I think it deserves the appropriate wisdom kind of title.
The respect, yeah, absolutely. And it reminds me of a picture paints 1,000 words.
Exactly.
And it's just as simple, and it's best to communicate through pictures and symbols, because we recognize it. There's something in us that recognizes it, and we have a feeling about it, and it evokes all of our senses often. So yeah, this is good.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was that was kind of an exploration on one hand of the human being in terms of, we're either in the past, the present, kind of, or the future. And in the very simple way, if we haven't reconciled the past, we can't ever get to what's going on now. And if we can't do what's going on now, then we can't chart a very good course into the future, because, we're stuck in the past and we're not basing it off of the most current information.
Well, it's chaos.
It's chaos. Yeah,
right. There's no reason. There's no rhyme or reason, maybe.
Exactly. And it's, when we're electing, let's say, people to government, oftentimes it seems best to choose people that are charting a course into the future based on the most accurate and current information. Let's say you could just randomly pick out like a government official from 1970s and drop him now. they might not have a very good idea of where we're going in the future because they have no freaking clue about what's going on now, right? They're literally stuck in the past. And so unless we, and again, I want to use the word genius, and I don't want to use it in any like trivial sense, but someone who can truly integrate all that they've ever been and all the people that have come before them, like all of that wisdom, all of that work and experience that is stored within you, truly integrate that into the present moment. That is, you can learn from the present moment and accurately be updated by exactly what's going on. That's a genius. And that's going to give you the best chance of not only just participating, but like truly envisioning and creating that future. And again, it applies so much to the idea of governance, because the idea of a government is it's a small group of people that represent a large group of people, right? In a very simple sense. And they're not only representing us right now, but essentially where we're going in the future. And so the idea is we need a group of geniuses. And I mean that, again, truly geniuses, a small group of geniuses that work on behalf of the people that are charting the course into the future. That is, they can properly work on behalf of the actual future that we want to create.
Okay.
Kind of make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Ish. Okay. So there's a second part to this. And
well, I did what struck me was, I don't want to disagree with you. They'd know what their job is if they listened.
So here, okay, so that is a very good point. And it's something I've also been thinking a lot about is once we access our genius, I think the next step to that in terms of the social element, the collective, is how we honestly share that with our fellow people. And this is something I'm still kind of working out in my mind, but just kind of hear me out on this.
Yeah.
The idea that our genesis and genes is, it's not just us, but it's all of the accrued wisdom. It's the storage house of the accrued wisdom over time. It's like there's a much, 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 much grander force that is contributing to us than simply our lifetime, right? Like there's a lot of experience that have been built into us from a lot of people. I think the reason that this is every religion, psychology, wherever you look, the idea of tell the truth, or at least don't lie. That is to accurately represent yourself in the best possible way. Why? It's the idea that we are all animated by this divine force. We are all carrying genes that have all been accruing wisdom over countless decades and centuries. We are all truly fundamentally animated by this grander force than just our little selves. And it has to be wise, or else we wouldn't be here. It wouldn't have made it this whole way. When we tap into that wisdom, we might not even understand it because it's such a grand, powerful force that has kept us going all this way. So our only job in some sense at that point is to represent that as honestly as possible. It's not to distort it. It's not to manipulate it in any possible way. It's to attempt to understand it and learn from it, but it's not to kind of shape it in a way that you think, the world might want or need it, or in any way that you want. It's honoring the fact that there has been so much intelligence and wisdom built into you. Whether you look at it psychologically, biologically, it doesn't matter. There is so much infinite intelligence working through you that your job on behalf of society is to accurately and honestly represent that to other people so that you can expect the same. Does that kind of make sense?
I have a thought on that. And I was going to say this before, but this is a much better time to mention it now. And that is, to me, a genius is somebody who is clear, who has who very clearly expresses in a clear way, in a clear sense, everything that he or she understands, knows, and can talk about. That's what creates the genius, is the clarity of the message. And so I think that does that enhance what you say? And that's the idea, right? Is to go in, look for it, pull it out, and shine it as clearly as possible. Is that kind of following what you're saying?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Not to distort the inner intelligence. I always like tying things back to biology because I always think it's interesting to learn from.
Oh, totally.
But so there's you could say like our conscious selves, like you and I like mint chocolate chip ice cream and I'm drinking water and I'm, watching TV.
Right.
We can pay attention to roughly anywhere from 15 to about 100 bits of information. So let's just make it easy. We can pay attention to about 15 to 100 things at a time in some sense.
Okay.
At the exact same time, we are processing subconsciously anywhere from like 1 million to 1 billion bits of information. So literally there's a grander force of intelligence that is like 1 million to 1 billion times stronger than us in terms of computing power,
Right.
that is keeping us alive in every single moment and is responsible for our lives. So, whether you're looking at it from representing the genes, the genesis, all that accrued wisdom, or literally what you're built of, it's like to be Scott is to be on a 4-mile long ship, and all I'm doing is making small adjustments, kind of driving in some sense. Like there's a much grander force engine responsible for me. And I think the idea of truth and honesty is that we want to represent that in the most clear and undistorted way to everybody else. And it's a recognition that everybody else is inherently divine simply because they're here and existing. And it's everyone's job to access their genius, to reconcile, heal, integrate, and learn from their past, to be in the present moment and represent that as honestly as we possibly can. Because then we get access to everyone's genius. And sometimes it doesn't always make sense to us. And we are different. I love Einstein's quote: every man and woman is born a genius. But if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it'll live its whole life believing it's stupid. That is, when you access your genius, it's not for you to distort based on what you think other people want or need. Accurately represent that grander force that's emanating from you.
And how many of us do that? How many of us do that? We totally buy into this grand society's others' opinions of us and what we should be doing and how we should look and what we should say and what we should do. It's sad, really, but we have to, what you and I are all about, right, is let's get back to this, who we are, and lovingly, kindly, and with care, be who we are in the world.
Absolutely.
To put a simple spin on it, right?
Yeah, 100%. The idea of shining your light is, it's not a cheesy term in any sense.
No.
Light is another way to say electromagnetic energy. And I don't know if you've heard Zach Bush say this, but we all know that I don't know if we all know, but we are full of mitochondria. They're these little ancient bacteria or archaea that we ingested a long time ago in eukaryotic development. Basically, you have an estimated 14 quadrillion mitochondria in your body.
Whatever that is, yes.
That is 14,000 trillion.
Okay, right? So translation, lots.
Lots, exactly. And if you ever see a picture of the cell, oftentimes you only see like 1 or 2 mitochondria. And then a bunch of other stuff. That's not how it actually looks like. Cells will have like hundreds to thousands of mitochondria. It's like just full mitochondria.
Okay.
Here's where it gets trippy. If you take a square centimeter of mitochondria, it produces 10,000 times more light than a square centimeter on the surface of the sun. It's crazy to think about. We talked about genes, that's DNA. If we were to take your DNA out of your body and lay it end to end, you could wrap it around the circumference of the earth 2.5 million times. So when we're talking about shining your light, that idea is that you are literally built of the most incredible infinite intelligence you could ever possibly imagine. It's your job to tap into that. And when you do truly tap into that, and it is that kind of clearness, you shine your light. It's electromagnetic energy. And I mean, listening to my favorite neurosurgeon back in the 70s using, it was called like a magneto-electrodynamic something, some fancy word, some device, they could measure the heart field 22 feet from the body. They said that, the head is about 3. HeartMath has said 3 to 5. They found about 22. The point is, it all gets back to the same thing. Reclaim your past because you're built of divine intelligence. Stay in the present moment so that you can properly be updated. That allows you to kind of shine your light into the future and represent that honestly, because that's going to give us the best possible way to chart a course into the future that best represents what we truly want and need. So to tie it all back to governments, go ahead.
I was just going to say, that is our power, which is why I call my company Power Within. It's the most important thing, as far as I'm concerned. It's the only thing to know. And this is how we navigate life and get what we want, period. So yeah, thanks for bringing that up and allow me that plug.
Power, I've been thinking a lot about this too, because, you know, oftentimes we hear about, you know, certain people or certain institutions or things having power in life. I think wholeheartedly, if anyone thinks about it long enough, they'll realize that the only true power is human choice. And I'm like, I mean that technically.
Yes.
As human beings, when it comes down to it, we were built of this insane power, right? Like we said, a square centimeter is 10,000 times emanates more light than a square centimeter of the surface of the sun.
We're so much more powerful than we have ever had an inkling about.
And yeah, kind of to tap into that. And that is fundamentally the only driver of, like, that is power, and you can't get away from it. It's not money, because money is a contract and there has to be someone else who accepts. And if no one accepts your money, then you're rendered powerless with that money.
Well, money is the energy of your power.
Well, and you could say it's
a symptom.
It's a symptom, but the idea I'm only trying to get across is that oftentimes we view like a government or rich people as powerful people.
Oh, right.
But you can't have power as a rich person if no one accepts your money. If everyone says no, then you are rendered powerless.
Right.
Right? As a government that is powerful, what does that really mean? That is, they can dictate human behavior. What is behavior? It's human choice. So it all fundamentally comes back to the freedom of kind of accessing your own inner power and choosing what you want to do with that. That is true fundamental power.
Yeah, not the outside false portrayal of power in our society today.
The outside false portrayal of power is those things which try to regulate the real human power and try to force people to do things, right? That's getting at the real power.
Right.
So again, so tying this all to the idea of governance, so let's kind of put a nice pretty bow on this. A government is meant to represent the fundamental wants and needs that are desires of people.
Right.
You can't ever expect someone to accurately represent what you want and need if you don't even know what you want and need, right?
Boom.
When we think about how a government works,
Drop the mic.
I mean, we pay taxes. They are public servants. We literally pay their salaries. So if you were to think, if you ran a business and you hired an employee, how would you treat that employee? I'm assuming you would tell them what you want and need, and then expect them to carry that out. I don't think you would hire them and say, go do stuff. And then when they did stuff you didn't like, then you got mad. Like that's a little bit, it's a little bit silly, a little bit insane.
Or hire them and then do what they tell you to do.
Exactly. It's a weird relationship.
Oh, the tail wagging the dog.
Yeah, exactly. And so I know it is a little bit, you could say, kind of idealistic, but it is also fundamental to how we organize as human beings. Before we talk about the external manifestation of an internal desire, we need to start with what is our internal desire. Once we access our genius and we start kind of negotiating with that genie, we realize the grand, infinite, intelligent force that is emanating and animating from us. And it is our job to accurately and honestly and truthfully represent that. And then we can kind of meet up and see what the fundamental institutions in society should be serving, right? I'm guessing people will realize we still want and need water. We're still going to have plumbers. We still want and need electricity, right? But even our negotiations and contracts with them will be defined by how we want the water, what we want for electricity, yada, yada, yada. So I think that was just a really important kind of way to conceptualize everything in the external world as without begins with what is within.
Beautiful.
So there, I don't know how much.
Well,
there's a second part.
There is a second part? There
is.
Okay. Well, I mean, just on that note, we could easily talk about the Charter of Rights, and its place in our country, our nation, that has been so boldly trampled on as if it meant nothing, was designed with the idea of protecting all inhabitants of Canada.
Yeah.
Same thing in the States with their Declaration of Independence. It was written by men or people, I think it was men, but who reduced to writing the fundamental principles, or so they felt in the day, that they had developed coming from a society that was burdened with what we're looking at now, all kinds of, the British Empire, with rules and improper use of power and all of that stuff. And they started a whole country, like Canada did, the same thing, based on principles designed to serve the best way, if that's a good way to put it. And so, and that was just absolutely, as I said, trampled on and not considered at all in anything that's gone on in the last 2 years. And so talk about a false show of power. It's in our faces.
Yeah, it was interesting to think about the idea of laws and to really, what is a law? I don't think we can parse out something like a law versus something like a fundamental principle of a way of action. That's all. Let me clarify that in a better way.
Sure.
I'm not Catholic or Christian, but there is something that I know called the 10 Commandments. And from what I've heard from it, basically there was a lot of barbaric action at the time. And a guy by the name of Moses talked with God, and God said, look, here are 10 fundamental ways that you human beings can, like, rules that will allow you to live together and work together. They may not be perfect, but fundamentally, there are some things which you can all agree to. It's like the least amount of restriction to maximize your freedom and possibility.
Should promote a healthy, safe life.
Exactly. And so really, what is a law? It's an agreement of the people of the least amount of restrictions that we can deal with to maximize our own potential and possibility and freedom. Now, again, we have to start with fundamental things, because when we're thinking about, okay, a government seems to have something to do with a law. Well, a government, there's no such thing as a government. A government is just a group of people that are
acting on behalf of others.
A larger group of people. So the question is, if we all were to really think about what are the fundamental limits and restrictions that we want to put on ourselves and other people, like, let's start there. And I think it's important to really think about, and I'm sorry if this is going to sound inflammatory, but if the only reason you haven't raped someone is because there's a law prohibiting it,
we're in trouble.
We're in trouble. If the only reason you haven't killed someone, or the only reason you don't steal people's stuff, is because there's a law preventing it, we are in trouble. And the only reason I bring that up is, again, very much going back to what we initially talked about. Access your genius within. Do you not kill someone because there's a law, or do you because you're a loving, empathic human being? Those are two different things. Now, I think if we are going to have a serious conversation about fundamental restrictions and the least amount of fundamental restrictions required to have a maximally free society, we all need to first go inside and have that conversation with ourselves. And I just thought it was important to point out, because oftentimes it seems that we think of laws as these external things that external institutions impose on us. And in some sense, that's true. But what is it really? It's an agreement between a large group of individuals that says, look, we all want to be free. We all want to maximize our possibility and potential in this world. So what are some very basic and minimum rules that we can all agree to that will allow that to happen? And I think if we go in and start there, again, access that true genius, all the wisdom that has ever been inside you, what makes sense in the current paradigm, then we can chart a course toward a future that actually looks at a law system or legal system which represents
right
us.
The way I see it, and of course, anybody can see this. You don't have to be in law to do that, but I saw it all the time, is what happens when there are people who can't or won't or refuse to act according to their highest, best principles. What happens then, right? We have to have, we have to have something, some mechanism to change that, because it puts all of us in jeopardy. So I'm just thinking about our legal system and what we do. It's obvious that person doesn't know how to live with the principles of truth and meaning and love and all of those things that we hope everyone has a certain measure of. So what do? We treat them according to the way they're acting. I mean, yes, you need to stop the behavior. There's no question. You have to serve the larger interest and keep other people safe. No question. Whatever way that has to happen, I'm all for. Not crossing the line into brutality or death or injury or anything like that. But the second part is then we punish as opposed to rehabilitate. So
Right.
what's that doing? That's just perpetrating even more of that. So shouldn't we be bringing them back to, here, let's learn something about, here's how we all should be acting. You should want to act with care and kindness towards others, because guess what? You're going to get that back. But anyway, I digressed there for a minute and took up time, Scott, sorry.
No, it's true. The countries that focus most on rehabilitation have the least amount of reincarceration rates.
And that's how our Indigenous populations, from what I understand, for the most part, have handled their own internal, not today necessarily, they're trying to, but handled their own transgressors, and interesting that largely happened in matriarchal societies, but that's a conversation for a whole other day.
This is a concept I've been thinking about a lot, but what does it truly mean to heal? And I think it's going to play a big part in exactly what we're saying.
Oh, love it. Yeah.
What I've kind of come to is, in order to truly heal, it's not getting rid of something. It is having a greater force that is in opposition or different to it in many ways. And what do I mean by that?
Mm-hmm.
To heal from your past, in some sense.
Yeah.
You can't just get rid of your past. You can come to an understanding that is more powerful than the trauma that you incurred. And believe it or not, I was turned on to this by this guy who's become world famous in physical rehabilitation. And basically what he started to find was, athletes, I mean, even pro guys were coming to him with like busted up knees. And instead of trying to get rid of the problem in some sense, what he was actually doing was providing a more intense stimulus. And that more intense stimulus was more powerful than the initial injury, and therefore it took precedent. So it's the idea of, you can't erase the past, but you can integrate it, and you can come to an understanding that is even more powerful than that which once hurt you. So let's say you're bullied as a kid, and that was very sad, right? You can drink a lot of alcohol and become and again suffer amnesia and forget about it. Or is to heal it, to come to an even stronger, more powerful understanding of love. That is to recognize the hurt that was in another individual. And because that stimulus of love and understanding was a hell of a lot stronger than that initial trauma, it kind of transmuted it into a whole new thing. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, the words that came to me as you were saying is the way to heal is to invite it all in. It's always there, it's always been there, but to invite it to show itself. And like you said, integrate, I would have said assimilate it, put it in its proper place. And one of the heart math techniques, I'm just at a loss for a moment what it's called, but essentially it's bring the issue into your heart and melt it in an environment of love and acceptance and peace. And I love that image. And that technique, by the way, works big time. And it would be far more powerful if I could remember the name of it and how to do it. But that's the whole thing. And maybe I don't have to. Bring it into the loving presence of your heart and let it melt just by loving it, by seeing it, by acknowledging. I mean, that's a basic human need, right? To be seen, acknowledged, accepted, and loved for our unique specialness. That's a need, not a want, right? So when we can do that for ourselves, including all parts of ourselves, because we all have those dark parts, we all have the light parts, and we bring it all in and we make our own stew the best flavor that we can. And so, yeah, that's healing.
As within, so without. So as we're talking about incarceration in people, when people, let's say, commit murder, I'd say to punish is to almost try and get rid of, and to be amnesia, like just pretend, just get rid of. Or do you, like you say, integrate it and overwhelm that person with an insane amount of love? And I mean, you can look at all the researchers now that are looking how people heal, and when you access these states of consciousness, call it love, ecstasy, deep healing, forgiveness, gratitude, whatever it is, it's such a powerful, like, human biochemical state. It completely overwhelms you and overrides the past, and people have these breakthroughs, and they can see on brain scans when people are going to have the breakthrough, because there's so much energy there. And if we can apply that to, let's say, as we're talking about the legal system, like, yes, for sure we need laws, and as we talked about, first we have to do the work to figure out what are the fundamental amount of, like, limited restrictions that we want to maximize our possibility. And then, okay, if people step out of line based on our agreed set of rules, what do we do and how do we handle that? Well, I would like to think if we have a collective group of geniuses that have integrated all the infinite cosmic intelligence that they are built out of, and you smother that person with that amount of, whether you call it love or whether you call it electromagnetic energy emanating from your body, just so everyone knows, when you're in a heart coherent state, as you're a heart math coach, that is your brain and your heart and all your organs are working together the best. It's like the conductor in a symphony is organizing all of the fantastic instruments in the symphony. When that works best, you get the best music. The person with the most heart coherence will dominate other human beings, because everyone wants to be a symphony. You are all built instruments.
But here's why: because the heart wave is a very strong carrier wave. When you are in a high coherent state, other hearts physically sync up with yours. And when other hearts can also have that very strong carrier wave, call it what you want. I call it love, just for simplicity. They feel great, and they don't even know why. Now, if that's not love, I don't know what is. I mean, that's the best, most tangible. That's a little woo-woo to think of, but it's based in neurocardiology. It happens. It's physiological. It's physical. So that's why that works. There's a physical explanation for that.
And it's funny, that's an interesting idea when we're talking about governance, which is a small group of people representing a large group of people.
Right.
And if we're going to talk about a fundamental want and need desire, and that's accessing your genius, a genius will be someone who is completely clear and emanating their extremely coherent state of being.
Right.
Right. Like someone who is really integrated their entire being, like, man, they're put together. Like you can sense that in someone.
Yes, you do. You do feel it.
You feel it. And then when everyone else starts to resonate like that, well, that's a pretty powerful, large group of people. And then it seems that clarity emanates from that, right?
Yes.
Like it's the most limited amount of noise with a very clear signal. And then it would be easy to provide instruction to a smaller group of people that you pay to carry out your fundamental, deepest desires.
Wow, that is so cool. The other thought I had is, what is laser other than a very concentrated, clear, powerful light? That's why it works.
Yeah, exactly. It's coherent light. You got it.
Yeah. So yes, I love that. I love that you have very cleverly brought us back into ourselves and shown us how we actually influence, not control, how we influence everything around us, and how it is absolutely possible that government and the populace at large can work together. But as always, it starts here.
It always starts within.
Yeah.
And within becomes more clear, so will without, because because what else is without? It's a representation of what's within.
It is. We live in a holographic universe, which means that life reflects where we are. The good, the bad, and the ugly.
Absolutely.
This is great. I love it. I'm doing good. This, well, that kind of sucks. So maybe I should work on that, right?
That's
It doesn't
called,
lie.
no, that's called learning from the past so that you can chart a new course into the future, right? It's all we're talking about.
Exactly. Scott, that's a beautiful way to end this. Thank you. I hope we got to all your points, but if not, we'll be back with something else. Trust us to have a conversation and go, oh, that would be really cool to talk about. And you know what? We just had the conversation we can have in front of other people who might find us somewhat interesting or not. Because we think we're interesting.
Yeah.
This is great. It's great to chat, Scott. So anything else that you'd like to lay on us before we depart?
Perhaps a reminder that every single one of us is built of some divine cosmic intelligence, and the only reason that we have gotten here to this point, and the only reason that we're even functioning psychologically, biologically, is because there is some massive coherent force that is making every single part of us work together in this very now moment. And
beautiful.
Access that is the most beautiful thing I think we could ever imagine.
It is, and that's our creator, that's our source. Whatever that is, it's not human, it's not man, it's something greater than all of us. Yeah, beautiful. I love it, Scott. Thank you. Thank you for taking the time to prepare that, to think about this, to talk to us, all of us, including me. And for those listening, thank you for staying with us to the end. Always appreciate you watching. And I would ask if there's a question you'd like to ask or a comment. Questions, comments, observations, challenges are absolutely welcome. You can reach out to me at chris@powerwithin.ca. And let's have a chat. And maybe whatever you raise will be something we could talk about in another podcast, or maybe you want to be on this podcast because you think you've got something really cool to say, and we would love to host you. So again, Chris, CHRIS @powerwithin.ca. Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching Wonder Wisdom. Thank you, Scott. And we both together wish everyone a beautiful, beautiful, coherent, loving, caring life that includes everyone. See you again.
Thanks, everyone.